Hey team, before we dive into today's episode, I've got a quick favour to ask. The Women's Football Hub merch store is now live, and every purchase helps support our work as a non-profit championing women and girls football from the ground up. There's something for everybody, adults and kids. There's loads of colours and sizes, and your support helps us grow the game one piece of apparel at a time. Just head over to www.womensfootballhub.com to check it out. Thanks for backing the hub, and now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome to Women's Football Hub. I am your host for this episode. I am Carolyn Kent, and today we are going to be discussing the pioneering new safeguarding partnership being delivered by Kyniska Advocacy in the Barclays Women's Super League. So who better to ask along than the woman who led on this project? It is none other than former Nottingham Forest and Glasgow City player, Lauren McMurchie.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for giving up your time, because I know you've been very busy of late setting up this project and, of course, working for Kyniska. Could you start by telling us just a little bit about Kyniska Advocacy and your role within that organisation?
Of course, Advocacy is the UK's only athlete and survivor-led safe sport organisation. So by safe sport and safe sport organisation, basically what we're trying to do is just have a sporting community, so across all sports, where we foster a safe environment for all athletes. And we really value and want to have protection and welfare of women at the heart of what we do. I guess my role is in support and outreach. Obviously, I'm delivering the WSL football project in partnership with them. But the kind of three main pillars of which we operate from a Kyniska advocacy perspective is we advocate, we educate, and we also support. So I guess the advocacy piece is ensuring that all sports communities have a safe environment. They've got structures in place that serve to protect the athletes from any sort of mistreatment or harm or abuse. I guess the education piece is similar to what I'm doing with this project. So just ensuring athletes, coaches, practitioners across all sports, parents as well, understand the importance of athlete well-being and being able to spot signs of abuse or red flag behaviours, anything of that sort of nature. And then lastly, the support piece. I guess that's quite self-explanatory. We're really trying to fill the gap in the support system for survivors of abuse in sport and genuinely just support athletes and people at all levels across sport just to feel that they have someone to speak to, get advice from, or be signposted to someone who can help with whatever they're dealing with or going through.
Nice. And of course, safeguarding is a term that comes up more and more, especially with regards to sport. What does that actually mean to you with regards to Kyniska and also professional football?
I think for me and for Kyniska and with this project that we're delivering is it's just creating healthy environments. I think oftentimes when people hear the word safeguarding, they're fearful or they don't really want to engage with it. It's something that maybe has negative connotations for people. But really, in terms of professional football, it's creating those healthy environments, having open communication, people knowing that there is support available, there's information available. They can reach out to people if they want to know more about certain aspects of what does create a healthy football environment. I think essentially we want athletes to thrive and be the best version of themselves in those environments. So for me, that's the main purpose of what we're doing here.
Nice. And safeguarding, we were chatting before we came on and we were saying people hear safeguard and automatically think that there's something negative. But this has really been a more proactive initiative with regards to the WSL, hasn't it?
Something that's really pioneering and really motivates me about the project is it is proactive, it is preventative, and it's trying to move away from what we've just spoke about, people having that knee-jerk reaction to the word safeguarding or the topic. Is really trying to be proactive, giving people, the athletes, the coaches, the practitioners, the tools to spot red flag behaviours, to recognise signs of abuse. Where can you go for support? How can you speak up if you want to speak up? If not, who can you go to that can support you with that? So I think that's something that really, as I said, really motivating about this project that we're leading.
All right. So let's walk us through the partnership then. How did it come about and what is it going to mainly entail?
I guess my background is football. I've done lots of different roles through sport and football. I coach a little bit at the moment as well. So I was employed by Kyniska Advocacy specifically for this project just because of that football experience. But also I do really care about the experience that people have through sport, through the work I've done off the pitch as well. So in terms of the project and what we go out to deliver and what clubs expect from us is it's very interactive. Being a player myself, the last thing I want to do is sit there and look at a presentation for 2 hours, slide after slide. So it's a lot about the players and the practitioners within the clubs engaging with each other and maybe moving through some scenarios. They obviously get some information from us in terms of key definitions around positions of trust or positions of influence, what misconduct might look like, discussing what red flag behaviours might be, which often is termed poor practice or low level concerns as well. However, we prefer to use red flag behaviours just because it doesn't diminish what's been going on. And we also look into like understanding your boundaries as an athlete as well, what consent looks like, also key communication principles that you can use and you can lean on. If something doesn't feel right and when you've got that gut feeling, trust your gut, like how can I address this and how can I reach out for support? So signposting to resources as well that athletes or coaches, practitioners in the football environment can read up on and look at if they want to just get a bit more information. So it's very interactive. It's very to and fro. We don't stand up and speak for the whole time, and we try not to anyway. And we really want to hear from the people within the football clubs. What actually does it feel like to be you? I have played football for a number of years, but every single club's different. Every league's different. I guess England will be different to Scotland, for example. So it's really getting that conversation going and going back to what we said earlier about safeguarding as a topic, getting people to engage and speak about it and know that it's good to speak about it. And the only way we're going to be able to improve and make environments healthier is by having that discussion and that hearing that feedback. So it's as much about us listening as it is about us delivering.
Now let's go into those sort of red flag behaviours. If you were to kind of pick out ones that you thought, do you know what, that would be a red flag behaviour, because I want to be careful kind of focusing solely on red flag behaviour, because actually safeguarding should be about the environment, being able to say, hey, I've got a problem, can we chat about it? But people are going to think red flags. So what would be some of the things you might expect in football, for example?
But see, I think with the professionalisation of the women's game and football as it is, there will be, as practitioners and coaches in that environment, there will be codes of conduct. So red flag behaviours would be anything that violates something in a code of conduct. Red flag behaviours tend to be something that happens potentially once. Maybe someone's addressed it. That's really not what we expect here, for example. An example could be publicly ridiculing someone's performance, for example. That might happen. Red flag behaviour, not really appropriate. But if it's something that's consistent, then that would then tip into, okay, this is a bit more serious than just a red flag. That might be a potential sign of something deeper happening.
And I think as well, sometimes you look from a leadership perspective, don't you? Because when you talk about publicly ridiculing, when you allow behaviours like that, you almost give the green light for other people to continue with that behaviour. Is that fair for me to say, or am I talking nonsense?
That's the thing as well. Like it is tricky in a team environment. There's a group of people. If things, as you say, do go unchallenged, then that behaviour can be normalised. And I think sometimes, if you think about football in general, there is this entrenched stereotype within football that it's not really for women and it's a men's game. And we always have comparisons between the women's and men's game. So once that behaviour, that stereotype is normalised, it's very difficult to then get rid of that and to challenge that. But I think with the training and with the red flag behaviours in particular, it's just about having an awareness of there's so many things it could be, but having an awareness of if something doesn't feel right to you or it doesn't sit right with what said to you or something you hear or something you might see, whether it's between coaching staff and players or between coaching staff themselves, between players, that's something that I think if we can encourage communication and not necessarily challenging, saying, do you realise if you say that kind of makes me feel this way? Have you thought about this? It's just opening up that conversation. I think that's what we're really trying to do with this training and this education.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, like, I've definitely been in environments where it's been that sort of hierarchical top down, I say this and you all do. And that's where I come back to that sort of leadership element. And I suppose what I'm coming round to is how is that going to look from a safeguarding element for coaches versus players? Does that make sense?
Of course, I think, listen, we go out to the clubs and we have sessions with players
Mhm.
as players, and then we have sessions with the staff, and that can be, they've got so many staff now compared to when we played. Certainly before, it would be like you'd have your coach and then you might have a physio come on a game day, for example, whereas nowadays there is like a multidisciplinary team. And listen, with WSL football as well, there's every season and every year that goes on with women's football and it becoming professionalised even more. The minimum standards are increasing each season. So there are minimum standards that the staff have to meet, the clubs have to meet. And we're just going in there almost to, it's not to make people fearful, but it's to open up that conversation of, okay, this might be a scenario, there's context there. How do you speak? What's the language you use? What tone have you? What is the context? It's also knowing, I think a lot of times in team sport, it's a one size fits all because we're a team and we all have to adhere to the one rule. But as athletes, we are individuals as well. So it's almost that switching to the player centered, athlete centered thinking of getting to know the people in your environment. And someone might respond one way to something you've said, and someone might respond a different way. And that's not to say they're wrong, you're right. It's to have that conversation of, okay, how can I best share this information with you, for example? So there's lots of grey areas in context that's important in football environments, but definitely from a leadership perspective, like any sort of organisation or business, if certain behaviours are normalised at the top, then that does trickle down. So that's something that we are very mindful of. And as the project evolves, Kyniska Advocacy do deliver that board level training across other sports. That might be something that evolves as part of this project. But at the moment, just to begin with, we are in clubs focusing with the players and then the multidisciplinary team that support the players directly day to day.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've worked in men's football, I've worked in women's football, and I was telling you before I came on, I've definitely seen some things that have made me go, oh, I'm not sure how comfortable I was with that. And it's almost funny how, especially in men's football in particular, shouting at somebody is actually almost normalized, and it's not everywhere. It's not always like that, but I think as well, sometimes I listen to fans talking about how people should be spoken to and thinking, if you were spoken to that in your workplace, there's absolutely no way you'd be turning up on a Monday morning. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think it's one of the things I've always thought about kind of football is it's a workplace. And would you allow that in your workplace? Now, I appreciate professional sport is different, but do you go in with a different attitude because it's professional sport, so it has to be different, or do you go, it's a workplace?
But exactly what you're saying is right. And I think going back to our points earlier with the entrenched stereotypes and things like that, it's almost, I think, being I guess, a staff member at a club as well, I obviously only volunteer, it's not my full-time job. But I think often when you think of, oh, if you work in football, you just work until you burn out because that's just football and that's what you accept. Or you accept that you're going to get shouted at or you're going to get ridiculed in front of everyone because that's just what happens. But this is where we need to do the work, and we do have a real opportunity. And I said earlier with comparing men's and women's football, that we do have a real opportunity with the rise in popularity of the women's game, the increased professionalism, the fact WSL Football have commissioned Kyniska Advocacy as an independent body that's not related to football at all, to help them deliver this work and to create the content with them, speaks volumes about how they want to move forward with like athletes at the heart of what we're doing, and the support, wraparound support there that we have as part of this project is hopefully the first step in undoing some of these stereotypes and maybe avoiding or having less of an impact on what's maybe not right in the men's game. Maybe we've got a chance here with women's professional football, especially in England, with this project to really set a standard and really create across the board as healthy environments as possible. And just because things happen in the men's game, it doesn't mean it's right there either. People are like, oh, if this happened in the men's game, it would be a problem. Is that also right? I don't think so. I think this sort of training and this sort of education would be valid in men's football as well. Whether that would be something that all clubs would be open to, listen, who knows? That could be a completely different conversation. But I think across all sports, not just football, having this type of education around how you can create healthy environments across the board, across a club environment from the top down would be really useful.
Now, is there differences there, between safeguarding the women's game versus safeguarding in the men's game? Can you think of any particular examples?
I think, listen, if we look at, I guess, data or like statistics and things like that, I think boys and girls as children, there's not much difference between like maltreatment of players at that level, but certainly as adults, like women do experience higher levels of maltreatment. So I guess if we think about it from a safeguarding context, I guess with women's football, there statistically would be a higher risk of female athletes suffering harm. I think if you even look to the media across sport at the moment, there's many athletes, female athletes especially, speaking about abuse, especially online as well. There's been also a lot of stories in the media, even just of women out running and having abuse shouted at them. I think it was two police officers who did a did a sort of, I
Yeah,
don't want to call it a project, but they were undercover and they were
we did.
alluding to this. So I think if you just look at female athletes compared to male athletes, it's not necessarily between men's and women's football. I think there is data and statistics there. As adults, women are more at risk of some sort of maltreatment.
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting because I can't remember the athlete's name, but one of the USA track athletes was essentially her flight details were doxed, and somebody followed her to the airport and was turning up at all of her flight times. There's and I'm not saying that doesn't happen in other areas. And of course, the Republic of Ireland have recently said about their security. They're not being happy with that. I think that's part of the Eileen Gleeson case that's going on at the moment. So that there probably are, with regards to less access to certain people like security, maybe there are more safeguarding risks for female athletes, especially as popularity goes up and they start to become well known. So there's definitely things to think about there. Do you think as more money comes into women's football, that's going to change safeguarding risks?
It's a good question. I think it's like a really interesting topic, and even going on to what you said about the rise in popularity and things like that. And you'll probably relate from when you were involved as a player, and like I certainly relate when I was at Glasgow City. There is that uniqueness of women's football where fans can have a bit more connection with players at games, for example, and it's really lovely. And it's getting to that stage where I think there's a few players definitely in the WSL one that have said there's definitely it's getting to that stage where that's no longer possible all the time,
Yeah.
and it's almost that tipping point where fans maybe expect something, but then now it's
Mm.
not really safe to do so because of the rise in popularity. We're in bigger stadiums now, there's bigger crowds. Obviously, more money potentially brings more personnel, more resources, better infrastructure, maybe having a think about policies put in place to ensure the safety, not just of the players, but also the fans as well, with that expectation of having that contact with players. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens in that space. But it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, and I think we were chatting as well before we came on. Power dynamics within sport are interesting, aren't they? Because I've always kind of thought about if more people are starting to invest in sport, and this again comes back to leadership, people who are very good business people don't tend to invest money in something and then want to lose money. And I think I've always spoken about the fact that backroom staff in particular can be vulnerable with regards to safeguarding issues because you are effectively replaceable as a backroom member of staff. So it's nice to hear that you are looking to work with some of the backroom staff as well, because I think they can be particularly vulnerable.
Of course, and as we know, and I think especially if we look at football in general, it's cutthroat. It's a cutthroat business, and if you just need to look at coaches, sometimes coaches can have a handful of games and then lose their job. So that I think we need to appreciate as well, and something we do speak about in our training, especially with the staff, and we listen to what they've got to say in terms of that, because already you're in a high pressure environment because it's elite sport. You want to win on the weekend. The main aim is to get 3 points on the weekend or get into the next round of the cup. And sometimes, as individuals, you're just doing the best you can possibly do, and things are out of your hands. But you may lose your job. You may be replaced by someone because everyone wants to work in football, right? It's a privilege. It's a privilege to work at clubs, and that's how it's seen sometimes by the business itself. So I think it's important, and when we're speaking about the multidisciplinary teams or the staff or the backroom or whoever it might be, this training and education is a real opportunity for them to think for themselves. Okay, what are my boundaries? This is my job. I love it, of course. I'm passionate about it. I want to support the players, but I can't support the players if I'm not taking care of myself. So it's that element of a healthy environment is taking care of yourself first and foremost so that you can be best placed to support others.
It's interesting because some of the backroom staff will have codes of conduct that actually have that written in, like your mental health, you have to check in with yourself before you go to work. Certainly, the physiotherapy code of conduct for the Healthcare and Professions Council, that is definitely now written in. And I think we are getting better at looking after mental health. I think, yeah, and I think what's nice is the more players that come out and start to talk about it, I think the more that kind of gives us more conversation, doesn't it?
100%. I think we are blessed as well in women's football. We do have a lot of the athletes who really stand for something, if they feel something and they're trying to make things better for themselves and for the athletes that are at the top of the game now, but also for those across the sport at all levels. If they're coming out and speaking about these challenges, whether it's mental health or whether there's too many fixtures, whether their bodies are breaking down, whether they just need a break because it's an absolute roller coaster of a life, I can imagine, at the moment, being a female footballer at the highest level, then that normalizes that. So we want to have that conversations, we want that type of conversation to be normalized, not the be quiet and just get on with it, even if you're not feeling 100%. Your job is just to do and not say anything, which I think is what probably when I was younger and I was playing is what I thought was like my requirement as a female player.
Yeah, because you're going back to that sort of, if you don't ask somebody how they're feeling, they don't have to tell you. So that sort of culture of silence, which is never good. Now, what I like about female footballers in particular is they are actually starting to speak up about, do you know what, I've had this issue, I've had that issue. Now, of course, we had some big issues with regards to social media during the Euros, and it certainly wasn't just England. Obviously, Jess Carter, probably the one that most people will recall. Safeguarding in social media, is that's going to probably be a big thing for players, especially professional players?
And I think it's something that they want more support with because it's a catch-22 because social media can be amazing, especially for athletes in terms of personal brand, raising their profile, also for clubs. A lot of the time we see with fans, especially for women's football, they might follow players and then that brings, so if their player signs for a certain club, that might bring new fans to the club because they support that player, for example. But then there is the element of you are opening yourself up for criticism. Obviously, the professionalization and the fact that women's games are on TV now much more, that's much more publicized. There's more eyes on it. So people seem to just want to comment on it and watch it, even if they hate it. So having that element of there needs to be some support around there. I know, I think for whether it was the World Cup or the Euros, there is like a software or some sort of digital platform where they analysed all the interactions on the players' posts and took out some data on if there was abusive comments, what they were specifically related to, and they were in different categories. There's loads of reports on things like that. I won't bore you just now with that. And I think we see a lot of female players actually don't use their social media at all when they're at tournament football for their country. So I think that's an area where players are asking for support and do need support. Obviously, the social media platforms themselves need to do more, I think. The government have more of a role in that as well, working with those social media platforms and I guess working with people like Kyniska Advocacy who do lobby the government for changes in terms of safeguarding. So as other organisations do as well. So we do, I guess it comes down to everyone, which is obviously that's the tagline of safeguarding. It's everyone's responsibility, but it's also just about being a good person and not writing hate or spreading hate or making abusive comments. If you don't want to watch any sport or for women's football in particular, then don't watch it and don't comment hate. But unfortunately, it seems to be the world we live in at the moment.
Everything's so accessible, isn't it? And the issue that you have, of course, this happens in the men's game as well. The abuse that those players have to take is insane. And I'm not minimalizing it in the women's game at all. But the difference is that a lot of the brand partnerships the women are sometimes reliant on with regards to their salary, aren't they? Not that the men don't get paid for it, they do, but they're not necessarily completely reliant on it, right?
100%. And that's where kind of goes back to what I said about a catch-22. You want to have a good personal brand. You want to raise your profile because that can, listen, as a female footballer, like for the majority, once you finish playing, you need to have another job. Some still have a job while they're playing. Or when I was playing, I had a job and I played because you didn't get paid to play football at that stage. So you're completely right. So I think there's a lot of work to do to help support players and support staff as well and support people at football clubs with the online abuse that is quite prevalent. But I think there's obviously a lot of research going on at the moment and these things unfortunately take a bit of time. But I think with the training and the education we're delivering is we're trying to listen and hear feedback from clubs and from players on where they think they can be supported. And I guess all you can do is put some policies and procedures in place if you're thinking about around matches and match days of how to safeguard them in person. And then it's maybe just giving some advice on better use of social media. Maybe you just have a private page for yourself and your own world and your personal world and your family world, and you have a football page for just your football stuff. I don't know. I'm not an expert there, but there's things that we can maybe speak with the players about.
Or you get to a point where you have a team that do it for you, but some of those players are miles off of having that. Do you know, it is interesting when we talk about marketing and branding, because that's actually such a big thing now in professional sport. If you look at other sports, Caitlin Clark in basketball, Ilona Maher, with what she's been doing with regards to rugby, and brand protection is potentially a safeguarding risk in itself, isn't it? Because if you've got a kind of institution that basically says we need to protect the brand here, there is the potential for safeguarding risks towards players, backroom staff, or anybody within the institution who potentially wants to speak out, right?
And I think that's an area that needs careful navigation. And as you say, some players maybe at that level where they have a team or they have an agent or someone who is looking after their best interests who will be able to support in that because they'll have the expertise there. But there's so, as women's football is professionalising, it is still a very small percentage of those players that are at the top and maybe have access to these things. I guess all we can take sort of positivity from is the fact that WSL football now, who are leading those top two leagues anyway, are setting a precedent for how best to support players. And this is just the start of it. And this partnership that I'm involved in, and I'm sure as time goes on, other sports, other national government bodies, even within football with the FA, I know they do a lot of work in terms of that as well. So hopefully we'll start to see that trickle down, especially like obviously National League, Tier 3, Tier 4, down the pyramid there as well. But yeah, it's a big topic.
I think the great thing about this is if football, and I've always said this, I always say football should lead. And not because they're special in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's so popular. There's so many people play that game. I feel it has a responsibility to lead. And it would be really nice to see other leagues, other sports start to kind of take that step that the WSL have taken.
I just think, as we said already, like it's not just football, like all sports like could benefit from a partnership like this. As we said before at the top of the call, it's proactive, it's preventative, it's about having conversations. It's not about being reactive and waiting or having something happen and then responding to that. That's not what safeguarding is about, and that's not what we want it to be about at Kyniska Advocacy either. We just want the support and the safe sport education to be consistent across all sports. We obviously advocate at Kyniska Advocacy. I know the co-founder Kate does a lot of work to lobby government, and we're really trying to push to have an independent complaints function so that anything that happens across sport is independently investigated outside of their sport. So that just gives a bit of transparency, standardisation, and hopefully with more money coming into, obviously we're talking about women's football, but hopefully some of that money can be ring-fenced for safeguarding education or support or resources. So those are things that we're really trying to push for from Kyniska Advocacy point of view.
Nice. And I think that brings me on to a nice topic is what role does politics have to play here with regards to professional sport? Because for a long time, politics was, we don't touch sport, we leave sport alone. But do you think politics has got a big role to play here?
I think, listen, as we said, I'm just going to go back to before, everyone does have a role, and like government and politicians definitely do have a role. I think what's one of the taglines for sports? It's like a vehicle for change. And obviously, in regards to politics and politicians, they're there to help implement the change, aren't they? I think Kyniska Advocacy do a lot of work to lobby the government. I think they've had a lot of success already. So it's just one of those ones you just have to keep banging the drum and keep doing the good work. And if we can support and provide wraparound care for the athletes we're working with directly, then hopefully that will keep the ball rolling and we can make change at a politics level. But that would be my colleague Kate, but she would be much better placed to answer that question.
I'm sure you give yourself a little bit of time, you'll be able to answer that, no bother. So let's chat about your dream then. In the next 5 years, what does safeguarding look like in professional football? If everything goes really well, what does it look like?
Amazing. Listen, let's just aim big. We obviously want to have, not specifically just for football, but as I spoke about, an independent regulator, an independent body where anything that happens across all sports goes to that one place. So sports aren't having to investigate their own homework sort of thing. In terms of football, like we say when we go in to do the training, we're there to say the support is available. We're almost here, invisible in the background, that hopefully want you to use our support service, hopefully want you to reach out for any hand holding or wraparound care. So ultimately in 5 years' time, all of the clubs across the whole pyramids will have healthy environments where players have a voice, coaches have a voice, people feel confident and empowered to check and challenge. I think probably in football, like they're starting to do in other workplaces, and a lot of my work is in education as well, away from the football pitch, having that player voice and actually have it embedded in the policies, procedures, and the culture so that it's not just listened to, but actually you're taking what's being said and fed back and using that to create the decision making or to inform the decision making process. So I think that would be one part of it. Having something in place to support players in terms of the online abuse. Hopefully there'll be technology advances so quickly these days, doesn't it? So hopefully there'll be something in place, whether it's a subscription that players have or an app or something where they can be safeguarded from seeing hateful comments or messages or not having that be visible for them on their profiles or whatever it might be. And obviously I just want women's football to continue to grow and continue to raise the standards, the minimum standards that we're doing already. And just, yeah,
Big
I
plans.
guess that would be big plans. But yeah, from my own point of view, I've played a lot. I do a bit of coaching. I'm involved in a bit of player care as well. And I just want as many players as possible to have a really good, positive experience, whatever their outcome, whatever, if they want to be professional, if they just enjoy playing, if they want to play amateur games on the weekends, just really want them to have a positive experience. And that's why I'm really happy to be part of this project with WSL Football.
It's absolutely lovely to hear how passionate you are about that. It was really nice to see that. Now, for anybody listening today who's thought, you know what, I'd really like to talk to Lauren about safeguarding, whether that be in maybe another sport or whether that be something that they've got a project on, how would they get in contact with you?
Listen, you can go to Kyniska Advocacy. So we've got a website. Obviously, all the information is there if you want to read anything about us. We have like contact details there. You can email, reach out to us on social media. We've got Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it might be, whatever your preference is. Phone number there as well if you want to send a message, if you'd rather, if email's too formal. We've got loads of information on there. Obviously, we share a lot of that resource and that support with the players and the staff, and we deliver to them at clubs as well. But it's free for anyone to reach out to us, and we have a lot of informative material on our social media. We have a lot of informative material on our website. So in this day and age, probably the best place to go is there, and you can reach out to us and we'd be really happy to have a conversation and to get back to you.
I know you would. You're all very approachable, which is lovely. Lauren, thank you very much for coming along. For all of you who are listening, if you are dealing with anything with regards to a safeguarding aspect, please do reach out to Kyniska Advocacy. They are very approachable. Please always remember that safeguarding and the environment are vital towards performance. So everybody deserves an environment where they feel comfortable in order to enjoy and play sport. And we will speak to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Women's Football Hub. The information within this podcast is for informational purposes only. No material on this podcast is intended to be a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please contact your doctor or another healthcare professional if you have any questions about anything raised in this podcast.